Hey guys, we've seen numerous amazing Scrabble games this summer, including quite a few where it felt like the winner had to basically pull a rabbit out of their hat to come up with an improbable victory. And the game I'm going to show you guys today was no exception. In round 4 of the 2024 World Cup held in Albuquerque, New Mexico, longtime expert Mike Frentz faced off against Stan Miranda, another strong player who's been playing tournaments for almost 40 years. Stan had too many vowels on his opening rack and as such played a due for 14 points, dumping 4 of them. Mike also had too many vowels with an opening rack containing 6 of them, A, C, E, I, O, U. Now, Mike's optimal play here is probably audio for 8 points, keeping the E on his rack along with the I and the C, but Mike has too much respect for making good Scrabble content and as such, copied Stan playing a due through the D in a due for 8 points. This does shed Mike's E, so it's a little bit worse on equity, but like I said, even though it's a Scrabble tournament, you gotta have some fun and live your life. Love to see it. Stan now has too many consonants seemingly as he plays half, a nice overlap scoring 22. And Mike now pulls B, C, F and a couple of O's out of the bag. There really are shockingly few good plays for Mike here. He plays oboe for 12, which doesn't feel all that exciting, keeping CF on his rack, only scoring 12 points. But this amazingly is Mike's best equity option here. There are really just no good plays. He could play chef for 20, but that keeps 4 vowels and just 1 consonant. So oboe, as unappealing as it looks, seems to actually be a reasonable play for Mike. Stan now has a blank and he bingos with anyone's and adieus for 76. But this play actually scored 0, not 76, as Mike challenged it off the board. Now you might be wondering, which of these two words is the phony? Is it anyone's or is it adieus? Or perhaps is it both of them? Mike was pretty confident that anyone could not be pluralized with an S. But he wasn't so sure whether adieu could be pluralized with an S. He thought maybe that since adieu came from a French root, it might only be able to be pluralized by adding an X on the end. So, because he wasn't certain, he decided to challenge both of the words on Stan's play. That's a perfectly legal move. Whenever somebody makes a play, you can challenge just one of the words they form, or if they do form multiple words, you can challenge any combination up to all of the words that they form. And the play will be ruled unacceptable if one or more than one of the words are invalid. So whether both or just one of the two words in Stan's play are invalid, the word judge computer will output the same result, namely, simply, this play is unacceptable. Because of this vagueness in the word judge computer output, sometimes players will try to take advantage of it and encourage their opponent to play the same non-word 2 turns in a row. For instance, let's say hypothetically, Mike were absolutely certain that both anyone's and adieus were invalid words. Then he might elect to only challenge anyone's, because that might make Stan think, okay, Mike's not bothering to challenge adieus, he probably assumes it's good. And then Stan might play adieus again, and at that point Mike might be able to catch Stan off guard and challenge again, winning a second free turn. That does not apply here. Mike challenged both words because he wasn't sure of adieus. So he figured maybe if he challenges adieus along with anyone's, then that'll also discourage Stan from playing it again. It turns out that adieus is actually valid here, and anyone's is not valid. So the play still comes off the board, and we'll see whether Mike's decision here to challenge both plays pays off. We'll see if it successfully discourages Stan from playing adieus again, thinking that it might not be a word and he might risk losing a second turn. Mike's uncertainty of the adieus hook is very likely to be a big factor again soon, because there is not one, but 2 instances of adieu on this board, both of which could potentially be pluralized with an S. Mike also now has his own S, so he'll need to decide, does he want to risk putting an S on it when he thinks it might not be a word and Stan could potentially challenge it off, costing Mike his turn. Here he elects to play queef for 23 points, keeping the strong ELS sleeve. But we'll see, if Mike is able to draw a bingo with an S on his next turn, does he risk hooking an S onto a adieu? Stan doesn't have a playable bingo here, so plays Coney for 18 points, perhaps trying to distract Mike with the Y between the 2 triple word scores, and hoping that he'll be able to bingo on his next turn with the strong AEN blank leave. And here, guys, Mike already faces his next big decision about the validity of the adieus hook. He has the word tattles on his rack, and he can play it down the G column, hooking the S on ha to make sha for 66 points. But if he thinks adieus is valid, or at least that Stan might not challenge if it happens to be invalid, he can play it with adieus on the 12 row for 73. This not only scores 7 more points, but it's much safer defensively as Tattles and Sha throws a T between 2 triple word scores. And this is especially dangerous for Mike because he knows that Stan has ANE blank on his rack. Remember, just 2 turns ago, Mike challenged off Stan's phony bingo of anyone's with a blank S, which means that Mike can deduce, given Stan's rack on that turn and his subsequent play of Coney, that Stan kept AEN blank, so he has that along with 3 other tiles he just pulled from the bag. And putting a T in the 7th spot between 2 triple word scores when you know your opponent has AEN blank, a super potent leave for hitting 8 other words ending in something like ATE, this is extremely, extremely scary. So playing Tattles and Adieus is a much better play. However, Mike doesn't pull the trigger. He plays for 66 here since he really doesn't feel confident on the validity of Adieus. Let's see if that would cost him. Stan plays Axe for 47 points. All things considered, this is actually a pretty good outcome for Mike. Because Stan drew the X, he wasn't able to bingo here. And even though 47 is a lot, like I said, with AEN blank on Stan's rack, this easily could have been a lot worse. Easily, Stan could have been scoring like 140 points here with a triple-triple. And Mike now, with this rack, makes by far and away his best play, Jam for 68 points above the letters in Coney. And now Mike would face another big decision, as Stan bingos with Iodines hooking Adieus for 72 points. And when I was looking through this annotated game for the first time, I was thinking 100% Mike challenges this. Because by not challenging this, Mike is basically admitting that he made a mistake. Either Adieus is not a word and he made a mistake by letting this phony go, or it is a word and he made a mistake by playing Tattles for 66 in a dangerous spot when he could have played it for 73 hooking Adieus. Whether this word is valid or not, Mike will have by definition made a mistake if he lets this stay on the board. And psychologically speaking, that's such a hard play to do. The natural thing to do from a psychological standpoint is to double down on your decision from your last turn and challenge this play. Mike amazingly did not challenge. I was shocked by this, but it is the right decision because Adieus is indeed a word. So good on Mike for not getting bogged down in the psychology of this and making what was the correct decision under the circumstances. Mike has a pretty fun 9-letter bingo available on his next turn here. It's Overeaten for 76 points through the TE on the 3rd row. Unfortunately, he didn't spot it, instead settling for Rue for 26 through the U and Queef hooking Joe. This looks like a reasonable idea as it scores well and also takes out a potentially large scoring spot for Stan. Stan responds though with a very big scoring play in a different part of the board, Za and Zax for 73 points, jumping out to a 43-point lead. And to make matters worse for Mike, he draws 2 more vowels to his already vowel-heavy lead. He dumps 3 of them as well as his U by playing uveal for 16 to the L in Tattles. Stan responds with Pennate, a nice extension to clear out some consonants from his rack, and Mike draws the Q. Pennate was an excellently timed play by Stan because Mike was getting ready to pounce with the 88-point bingo of Iquorin through the U in uveal on his next turn. He could still play that through the disconnected E and U as a non-bingo, but that only scores 19 points, so his choice of Kadi for 28, also keeping a stronger leave, makes a lot more sense. Stan plays his W for 26 points between uveal and Tattles. Stan is still up by 43. Mike has the 7-letter word of engorge on this rack, but it doesn't play, so he plays Gone for 22 points above Pennate, scoring well and getting rid of one of his 2 Gs. Stan gets rid of some consonants by playing full through the U and adieu for 12 points, which also has the added benefit of mostly obstructing the second adieus hook, which prior to Stan's play remained wide open down the M column. Now, you might be thinking, does Stan even need to bother blocking the adieus hook? Because could he infer from Mike's suboptimal placement of Tattles that we discussed earlier that he's likely highly doubtful of its validity and would probably hesitate to play it again since he hesitated to play it before? Well, he needs to be very careful about using that logic, because now that it's much later in the game and Stan has a lead, the circumstances are very different than earlier when Mike took a lead by bingoing with Tattles and it was much earlier in the game. If the game gets to a situation where Mike is down a bit and his only playable bingo is with adieus, it's very plausible that he is going to try it, especially since Stan himself played it earlier with iodines. So Stan should be very wary of assuming that Mike is not going to play adieus here just because he didn't earlier, and as such, blocking as he did here still has a lot of merit. Mike pulled a Y and two I's after his play of Gone, not exactly what he was looking for, but he finds a nice play here of Jai-Right, hooking the Y to make fully, scoring well, getting 27 points, and unloading some of the clunky tiles from his rack. Stan dumps his V and his G with Vigs and Coddies, closing down yet another S-hook as he takes a 37-point lead. Mike draws pretty well after Jai-Right. He doesn't have any playable bingos here, but he finds a nice play of Toe in the top left part of the board, also forming top 1 and Wen. This scores 28 points, keeps a good lead, and further chips away at Stan's lead, cutting his deficit to 9. Stan plays Lab for 11 points through the A and Coddies. And right here, guys, is where Mike makes an absolutely mind-blowing play. He has Adipose as a 7 on his rack, but it doesn't play, so Mike is unable to bingo in this position. He figures that Stan just played off 2 tiles in a consonant-heavy but fairly bingo-prone pool. You'll notice that there is a blank, 2 E's, a bunch of R's, an S, and a T unseen, which are all very bingo-prone tiles. So if Mike figures that Stan is about to bingo and maybe slightly consonant-heavy, then the I in Jai-Right looks like a really good place for him to block. A play like Po for 20 points makes a lot of sense here, and it's actually the computer engine Makondo's favorite by a decent margin. It ties the game, keeps a really strong leave of ADEIS, especially drawing into a consonant-heavy pool, and it should make it pretty hard for Stan to bingo on his next turn, especially if he's consonant-heavy. However, this is not what Mike did. Mike's play could not possibly be more different thematically than this play of Po. Here, Mike played Taupe for 6 points, dropping just his E next to the word top on the board. This looks absolutely insane. Number 1, Mike is only scoring 6 points and getting rid of his valuable E tile while doing so. And number 2, perhaps even more blatantly, Mike is not only leaving wide open the I in Jai-Right, which, as we mentioned before, given that Stan's 11-point play of Lab suggests he's probably fairly close to bingoing, and the pool is already consonant-heavy, a floating I is exactly what Stan would want for a bingo. Not only that, but Mike also basically seems to donate to Stan another really strong and easy-to-hit bingo line down the A column. All Stan needs to do to bingo over there for a lot of points is put a high-scoring tile like an M before the E and play a 7-letter word vertically, and that's going to be nearly 100. So what on earth is Mike doing? At first glance, this seems like literally the type of play you would make in this position if you were purposefully trying to lose this game. So did Mike Frentz just completely forget how to play Scrabble in this moment? No. He had a plan. Let's see what that plan was. Whatever plan Mike had, it doesn't seem to be getting off to a good start, as Stan slaps down returns in the spot Mike voluntarily just opened for 74 points, and now Stan is up by 88, and Mike drew one of the 4 unseen R's. He has Sparoid on his rack, but that's not going to go anywhere, so how on earth is he going to win this game? Well, just when we all thought Mike was throwing the game away with Taupe, he plays the jaw-dropping Myriapods for 104 points from the Mai on the board. Not only is this a bingo, this is an out bingo. Stan has 7 tiles on his rack, and there are none left in the bag. So after this play, Mike takes a lead, and then he, in addition to that, stops Stan from making any more plays and gets 32 extra points from Stan's unplayed tiles, winning the game 466 to 418. So what on earth just happened here, guys? Let's try to break this down. Let's go back to the position where Mike made the seemingly bizarre play of Taupe for 6 points. What he noticed here was that he's got a shockingly high probability of drawing into Myriapods on his next turn. There are 8 tiles in the bag, which means combining that with the 7 on Stan's rack, there are 15 total tiles unseen to Mike that he could draw. Of those 15 tiles, 5 of them, 4 R's as well as a blank, would give him a 100-plus point Myriapods on his next turn. That's 5 out of 15, or a 1/3 chance that he hits Myriapods immediately after playing Taupe, which is quite significant. But there's far more to it than that, because like I said earlier, part of what made Taupe seem like a crazy play was that Mike is just giving Stan free rein to bingo down the A column for a lot of points. When he didn't have to play his E there, He could have, for instance, just played Tay on the top, which seems a lot sounder, not opening such a scary bingo line. But the catch is Mike actually wants Stan to bingo there, because look at the number of tiles left in the bag. There are 8 left in the bag from Mike's perspective before he plays taupe. That means after taupe, and Mike drawing 1 tile, there will be 7 left in the bag. So if Stan bingos down the A column, how many are left in the bag? Well, 7 minus 7, or 0. And that's exactly what happened. And then, with the bag empty, Mike bingos with Myriapods, ending the game and getting more points from Stan's now 7 unplayed tiles and wins the game easily. Even if Stan were to bingo down the A column for 100, Mike's outbingo of Myriapods should still win in the vast majority of cases, simply because it is an outbingo. That's so key here, guys. If Myriapods wasn't an outbingo, then Stan would still get another turn to score more points and unload tiles from his rack. With Myriapods being an outbingo, Mike deprives Stan of that opportunity and more or less ensures he's going to win the game regardless of what bingo Stan might conjure up down the A column. So this seemingly insane play is actually a super crafty and genius trap set by Mike, and Stan fell for it. Stan bingoing with returns on his next play wasn't punishing Mike for a seemingly ridiculous decision to open. It was exactly what Mike wanted to see, and then he drew exactly what he needed to finish this game with a bang of Myriapods for 104 points in an absolutely epic victory. Now, this does beg the question, since I've been talking about Mike setting a trap for Stan, what might Stan have done instead of bingoing with returns to avoid falling into this trap? Your first thought might be, well, what if Stan bingos elsewhere on the board to block Myriapods? Maybe he can play something like Terrains through this I and Gyri, which only scores 59, but still gives him an over 70-point lead, which should be enough to beat Mike as long as Mike doesn't bingo. Well, the problem is, Mike can now bingo himself down the A column. And any bingo Mike might have drawn there is going to win the game for him immediately, as, just like we saw before, it would be an out bingo and also score a lot of points. Now, as it turns out, this play would have won for Stan, because Mike's 7-letter word of Sparoid, which he had on his rack when he played Myriapods, would not have played down the A column, as SE is not a valid 2-letter word. However, that is just one of many possibilities from Stan's point of view. He has no way of knowing that that's what Mike held on his rack. Statistically speaking, given the unseen tiles in the pool, Terrains is actually a far worse play than Stan's actual play of returns, because Mike is much less likely to bingo through the I and Gyri with an 8, or with a 9-letter word down the O column after returns, than he would be to bingo with a 7-letter word down the A column after Terrains. So a play like Terrains definitely not the solution for Stan in this position. What it seems Stan should have done here is actually not bingo. The play of Earn for just 3 points from the E and Iodines is the computer engine Macondo's top choice. What is the idea here? Well, Stan takes an already chaotic situation and makes it even more chaotic, because Earn takes both an E as well as an S as hooks. So there are now 2 lines where a player can bingo with a 7-letter word on a triple word score. The 15-row hooking Earn, as well as the A column hooking the E and taupe. So Stan is basically passing the decision back to Mike here. He's saying, okay Mike, if you bingo in either of these spots, well, you take a lead, but guess what? I have ERST blank. I'm pretty much guaranteed to just bingo in the other spot, and now I, Stan, am going to be the one who bingos out. And that means Stan, not Mike, is almost certainly going to be the one who ends up winning the game. Remember, it's so important to be the one who bingos out, because then you not only deprive your opponent of any extra turns, you also get a lot of bonus points from their unplayed tiles, which, especially given the tile pool includes some high-scoring tiles like the K, C, M, and P, could amount to a significant and potentially game-deciding number of points. So now you might be wondering, okay, if after Earn, if Mike bingos, Stan is basically guaranteed to win, what if Mike himself doesn't bingo on his next turn? This could turn into a game of chicken where both players have bingos and neither of them want to bingo for fear of their opponent bingoing out. Well, I think that's actually a reasonably likely outcome, but it's an outcome that I think should be favorable to Stan given how much stronger his rack is. Remember, Stan is keeping ERST blank. We know that Mike cannot possibly have a blank, so it's going to be a lot harder for Mike to just purposefully forgo bingos and be like, alright, I'm forgoing my bingo now, but I'm basically guaranteed to have one on my next turn. Stan with a leave like ERST blank has that luxury. It's hard to imagine Stan drawing 2 tiles from this pool and not having a playable bingo somewhere on the board on his next turn with this strong a rack. Mike, however, is not in that position. Without having a blank, Mike is not going to feel like, oh, I can just play off like 2 tiles now and be basically guaranteed to have a bingo on my next turn. So Mike is probably going to feel like if he has a bingo, he's got to play it. He's got to take the opportunity while he can. And of course it goes without saying that if Mike never bingos, at some point Stan is going to just bingo and win the game. So either way, it seems very unlikely that Mike is going to be able to get himself into a situation where either he bingos and Stan doesn't, or Mike manages to be the one who bingos out. Stan is just going to have all the flexibility in the world and all the control of this game given how much better his rack is after a play like this. That being said, earn for 3 in this spot is a super challenging play to make in this kind of position, when you can much more easily just play returns, scoring 74 in the spot your opponent just opened. So I think this was a totally natural decision by Stan that probably the vast majority of players would have made. But it's this very fact, namely that playing down the A column is the natural and intuitive play, that makes Mike's trap play of taupe on the previous turn so strong. Again, the computer is saying that Po, for 20 points making pi above gyrite, wins considerably more often for Mike. But Macondo is a very smart computer, and Macondo is probably assuming that Mike's opponent after taupe is often not going to play returns, and it's going to come up with plays like earn that forgo the bingo, when in reality, most humans might not come up with that idea. So I think in practice, taupe might actually win against humans more than any other play in this position. It's difficult to know for sure, but whatever it is, you can't deny that this is an amazingly creative play by Mike Frentz in this position. To not only see the possibility of myriapods as a 9-letter bingo from the Mai on the board, but also to think, let me put my E in a spot where it just gives my opponent an easy bingo line, instead of fishing the E somewhere that keeps the board tighter. There is just so much thought and foresight that has to go into this kind of play, and also, frankly, guts. Because with this kind of play, if it works, sure, you look like an absolute genius, but if it doesn't work, you look like an absolute idiot. It's such a weird and silly looking play to make, to actually pull the trigger on it in a major tournament, and then pull it off and have it result in an absolutely miraculous win that was, I think, easily well above the bar to be featured in a Mac Miller YouTube video. Pretty awesome stuff, so kudos to Mike on this one. Really well done. That's it for this video, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this game. Let me know what you thought about this awesome game and play in the comments section. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for the next video. Bye-bye.